Yeah, okay, so I'll start over. So good evening and welcome, my fellow energy entrepreneurs and enthusiasts. I'm just thrilled that we have this exciting and really talented panel here tonight. And you know, I was walking around up in the cafeteria there and talked to a lot of friends and met a lot of new friends, and I was fascinated with the inquisitiveness and the engagement of our audience tonight. So it's a great audience. Can I have a show of hands? How many are associated with, in some way or other, with MIT? Raise your hand if you're. Okay, so that's pretty good. And now let's see Stanford. How about Stanford? What do we got here from Stanford? Yeah, okay. So, you know, I'm going to pass over silently the fact that Team MIT has Team Stanford right where we want them. So this is an experiment. This event tonight is an experiment. We haven't done this before. My name's Larry Kelly, and I had the idea for this, and I helped Doug on the energy and environment policy committee for the MIT Club here in Northern California, and we put on about 12 events a year, and mostly they're focused on educating our membership on some technology issue. We've had a bunch of professors come out from MIT. You know, Don Sadaway came out and talked about extreme chemistry, and Anantha Chandra Kasan came out and talked about pico and femto watt transistors, and Dennis White came out and talked about new high-temperature semiconductors, and that was really exciting. We've had, we do tours. I don't know if Phil Rutger is here somewhere. Phil runs our tours, so if you have, we've toured a lot of really interesting and exciting facilities where energy is used or made. And so if you have an idea for a tour, contact Phil or Doug. And then we have some other panels and things like that as well. And I also chair the energy group for the Band of Angels. The band invests in energy companies, among other things. We've looked at about 600 companies in the last 6 years. I've chaired it for about 6 years, and we've invested in about 20. Jeff and I are involved in that activity, and so if you have a little company and you want to get going and you're interested in getting some angel funding, I'm going to put a plug in for that. And Nancy runs DBL, Double Bottom Line, and that's a venture capital firm that is pure energy and environment, and so there's another opportunity there to talk with her about getting some funding there. And one of the things that we do in the energy interest group in the band is we have a series of seminars much like this. We do 10 or 12 a year, and they're also educationally focused as well. We have people come in and talk about various topics. And I was thinking, you know, about 75 or 90 days ago, I was thinking, you know, we got to do something here this year. We need another event. And I was thinking, well, you know, it's 2016. It's divisible by 4. What happens in years divisible by 4? Well, in February, you get an extra day. You know, get to work more. August, you get the Olympics. And November, you get elections. And isn't this a terrible year? I mean, this is just awful. The mudslinging and the ridicule and the personal attacks and everything else. I mean, it's vile and reprehensible. And you know, Paul Dirac would say to one of his graduate, you know, if I could borrow Paul Dirac, he'd say to one of his graduate students something like, you know, this is so bad it isn't even wrong. So we got some physicists in the audience. Yeah. So we thought, why not have a panel on policy? And it's an educational panel. The intent is an educational panel to talk about policy, to rise up above the muck and the mud. And we thought we would have speakers from representatives from each of the 4 parties. And so we've got just a stellar panel. And we've asked them to represent the philosophy of their party and the principles of their party as it relates to energy as they envision it. So they don't have to adhere to, you know, the candidates on the national stage. It's what they think the policy ought to be. And so you're going to hear some of that. Thomas Jefferson said, an educated and well-informed electorate can be trusted with our own government. So that's our objective tonight. We want to educate ourselves about where do we go with a national energy policy. So energy. So just a couple comments on energy. Energy pervades everything we do. There are no physical processes that I'm aware of that don't require energy. Companies that come to us and ask for funding that have perpetual motion machines go into a file on my computer that's called Second Law Challenged. So I was thinking about this the other day. Here's an interesting fact, and took me a while to really appreciate this. Since 1776 and the American Revolution, almost every, and you have to be a little generous with the almost every energy innovation and invention has occurred here in the United States. Almost every one. So you just think about that and absorb that fact. And what that's allowed us to do as a country is during the 20th century we became an economic superpower. We had spectacular economy fed by low-cost energy. We were able to support an extensive defense and security environment, and we hadn't yet really begun to think of the environment, but it was on the horizon. And so those are three things to think about from a national energy standpoint in terms of policy: defense and security, the economy, and the environment. And the panel will get into that a little bit later. So what happened later on in the 20th century? Well, we began to import a lot of oil, so we stopped being a major producer. And I think personally that affected we didn't make the right policy choices at that time, and that affected our ability to create meaningful jobs, and it affected our income as well. And so maybe we can touch on that in the panel. The other thing I think happened, and this didn't become clear to me until this last winter. We go sailing every couple of years, and last time we went in the Caribbean was about 15 years ago, and we went this last winter, and it's the first time I've seen significant amounts of coral that's been bleached out. And I think that's something we really ought to think about. So what's our objective tonight? Our objective is to think about to come up with, should we have a national energy policy? What should that policy be in terms of security and the economy and the environment? Should we be a world leader in energy generation, in energy products and services that we can sell elsewhere in the world? Products and services to me include things like solar panels and photovoltaic PV converters, electric converters, storage devices that we could sell on the world market. Should we be a leader in this space? Should we continue to have the lowest cost? I think right now we have the lowest cost in energy, whether you measure it in kilowatt hours or dollars per liter of gasoline or dollars per therm of natural gas. Should we continue to be a low-cost leader and have that advantage in our economy? And how do we leave the world a better place? How do we do no harm to the environment? So let me turn it over to Jeff. Jeff is our moderator for tonight. Jeff is 40 years experience in the energy industry on policy and technology, advising regulators and legislators and innovators and providers and academic and community leaders. Jeff is a fellow at the Stanford Distinguished Career Institute, is a former California Energy Commissioner, was appointed by a Republican governor, and his term was extended by a Democratic governor, so we got some fairness in here. His wife likes to refer to him as a decommissioned commissioner. and he's a Stanford guy, bachelor's and master's from Stanford.
Thank you, Larry. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. This being MIT Club, I'll bet there's a few Boston Red Sox fans in the group. And how about those Giants, huh? Good job, Larry, picking tonight. This is no overlap with any of that stuff. It's good. The Band of Angels and the MIT Club of Northern California have assembled 4 experts who've agreed to represent the major political parties in some civil discourse about national energy policy. Now, this is not a presidential debate or a surrogate debate. In fact, it's not really a debate. To my knowledge, none of these folks are running for office, and nor are they seeking your vote, nor are they necessarily sanctioned representatives of their political party. Well, we have a few of those folks running for president. The panelists are here to convey diverse ideas, perhaps agree upon some things, and to provide you with more information. They've agreed to represent their party's position, but not necessarily to defend their party or its candidate, unless they wish to do so. What we're trying to do here is show up the presidential candidates with an informed, respectful, and civil discourse on these topics. My job is to facilitate, moderate, and make sure we end on time, 9:30. So let me just briefly tell you the format. Each panelist is going to begin with a short introductory statement. I'm going to lead them through some questions covering about 4 topics. Then we're going to take questions from the audience, and then each panelist is going to have a chance to make a brief closing remark. We're not going to worry too much about the time, equal time notion in a formal debate. We're looking for good ideas, engaging discussion, and generative thinking that informs you. We're also looking for civility, but I think we've mentioned that enough. And a little lightheartedness would be okay too. In my mind, a successful panel would be one where the audience comes away feeling a little bit better informed and maybe feeling a little better about the future. So before asking questions of our panelists, let me just ask a couple of questions of all of you. Who's attending an MIT NorCal event for their first time here this evening? Wow. And who's planning on voting next month? Wow. Who has seen either one of the presidential debates? Wow. So you know what you're up for here, folks. And who's here tonight seeking relief from the presidential debates? Let me ask you one more question. Who thinks that their vote might be changed by what they hear here tonight? So, I hope we all understand where we're coming from. You all have the bios of these distinguished individuals before you, and as Larry indicated, we've limited them to 4 voices, despite the fact there's about 30 parties in the United States. Jim Iyer, to my left, is representing the Libertarian Party. Mr. Iyer's entire career has been about energy efficiency, renewables, and advanced electric technology, and now he's primarily concentrating on energy storage and the role it plays in integrating renewable energy. Nancy Fund is representing the Democratic Party. Ms. Fund is doubly successful as a venture capitalist, not only in generating wealth, but doing it to impact and improve society and the environment. She has a very full plate, combining business and social issues and finding time to take on political issues too. She's got a 5:30 call this morning, so we're going to let her go at 9:30. I'm 5:30 call tomorrow morning. Mark Roast is representing the Green Party. Mr. Roost. Yes. Mark is representing the Green Party, and he's charted his life's path serving humanity and living in harmony since he was in college. His career was very much influenced by Buckminster Fuller, who did a lecture course in comprehensive design science at San Jose State back in 1966. Mark, that's 50 years ago. Jim Sweeney is representing the Republican Party. Dr. Sweeney's CV does not nearly describe all that he's done in energy, including writing a new book this year, Energy Efficiency, Building a Clean, Secure Economy. I think Dr. Sweeney may have the more formidable task this evening of representing his party, but I know he's up for it. But just in case, Dr. Sweeney, would you mind autographing your new book for me before we start this?
Yes, if you give me the pen to do it with.
So, Jim, I'll just leave it here. So
Great.
All right, so let's get started. I'd like to begin in reverse order, if that's all right. Dr. Sweeney, would you care to make an introductory statement?
Yes, I would. First, when Larry contacted me and said, represent your party and your party's candidate, I said, no way on earth am I going to do that. First, I don't know most of his positions, but the ones I know are totally internally inconsistent with one another, and besides, I wouldn't do that. But there are principles, and there used to be principles of the Republican Party, and I'm gonna be talking from some of those principles. First, if we do slide 1, that whoever's gonna snap, get to it. Okay, slide 1, and just leave it up. Just leave it up as I talk to my introduction. As we think about energy policy, we need to design energy policy that rationally takes into account 3 issues and cannot ignore any of them. The economy, the overall economic growth, the fairness of the economy, the environment, and national security. And the energy policy we craft has to be a sensible recognition of all 3 of them, first point. Second point, energy policy must pay similar attention to issues of efficient energy use as it does to issues of appropriate domestic energy production. We can't forget one for the other, and they both have to be taken into balance. Point 3, we need to design policies so as to naturally get to a maximization of the overall benefits of economic security plus environmental benefits. We recognize that different people would put different weights on national security, on the environment, on the economy, but we need to be thinking about some idea of how we move to the maximization of the sum of those 3 appropriately weighted. To get there, we want to use market mechanisms wherever possible. But it's not always possible to do it all with market mechanisms, so we can't be afraid to go beyond market mechanisms if and when there are identifiable market failures. But we should resist the attempt to choose the winners just because we love one technology or another. We want processes, and I'll talk about some of the policies and processes as we go on, that doesn't pick winners. And finally, we want to recognize that, now going back to what Donald Trump was, mine is, many of you come from MIT. How many of you have brass rats on? Only one? How many has a serious brass rat rather than a little brass rat? Well, when I was a graduate, our brass rats was serious brass rats. So if any one of you gives me any locker room banter, we've got a bigger brass rat than you ever would have. And so I'll go on from that.
Excellent then. Dr. Sweeney, we're off to a good start. Mr. Roos, please go ahead.
Thank you.
Can we turn off the projector, please?
Yeah, actually, do you get a slide from me?
I can. Leave it on. Drake? I don't know if Drake can hear me up there unless I'm talking in the microphone. No? Mark, do I have your slides?
I don't know. I emailed it, but you may not have gotten it. I emailed it late.
Oh, that one picture?
Yeah, that one.
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't get it up.
Okay.
Sorry.
That was the picture that said, what if it was all a big hoax and we make the world better for nothing? That cartoon from 2009. Okay, so yeah, after that class I took, I did 50 years of exploring how we could combine practices and technologies to make a paradigm shift to living in harmony with each other and all our relations. If we create economies different in every ecoregion and ecosystem, appropriate for every culture, which are socially and environmentally sustainable and resilient, we can both save life on Earth and greatly enjoy our time here. Everything's related. The lives of all beings on our planet are related. The life support systems are related. About 10,000 cultures and languages, of which 5,000 to 7,000 still survive, many very marginally, emerged with the ecosystems around them, forming highly evolved templates for surviving and thriving. Human behaviors, good and bad, all came out of the same basic set of experiences, though with infinite variation. Understanding what these truths imply can be a good starting point for choosing which technologies and business practices would be best to use in each place on Earth in order to get an overall handle on climate disruption and the sixth great mass extinction, already causes of great suffering. Tonight I'm representing the Green Party. The Green Party and I really agree on a lot of things. This evening I'll give some planks from the Green Party's platform and its Green New Deal campaign, along with some of my understanding of what you can do to help us switch to clean energy in a broader context of sustainability and make substantial return on your investments in the process. And I would like to thank Eric Brooks, Jerry Grass, and June Brashears, Green Party activists, for their support in preparing for this event. I invite you to spend parts of a few evenings checking out our party platform and the Green New Deal if what I say tonight interests you.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Fund.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for being here tonight. And it's a privilege to represent the views and policies of the Democratic Party here tonight. And before I get into my view, which I think you know, is to make the U.S. international clean energy superpower. That's really what we're about. I do want to point out just that it's important to understand that it takes a certain temperament to be President of the United States. And I'm not sure Jim has that temperament.
Brass knuckles coming out.
And as for you, Mark, if you want to draw votes away from the leading candidate, which is myself, it's a free country, you can do that. But really, I just want to urge people, don't throw away your vote this year. It's important. So now that I've sort of cleared the air, let's get down to what's really important, which is, of course, to become that clean energy superpower. And the reasons are many. Obviously, we want to leave a better world for our children and grandchildren, and with climate change leading to extreme weather events, threatening to make certain parts of our country go underwater in our lifetimes, we have a lot of work to do. What I want to tell you is that we can approach the challenge of climate change with a no-sacrifice attitude and with results that really empower our nation, allow us to create new jobs, new industries, and tap into the innovation which has made our country successful since its founding. And to do that, I want to bring into line, I have my own trifecta, Jim had his, mine has to do with technology, policy, and capital. We've got to get all three of those things right in order to move ourselves out of the 20th century fossil-based economy, which worked well for that period, but is not well suited to what we need to do for the 21st century. And so I have actually, you can check my website, I have written my policies. I have a report that I wrote with my summer intern. The 2017 inauguration, Empowering a Clean Energy Nation. And if you read this, you'll see that we are not stopping 1 minute in terms of broadening the impact of the advances the Obama administration, which of course I was part of, and have led in terms of job creation, improving national security, and establishing solar, wind, and renewables in general as the heir apparent to our fossil economy of the 20th century. And so I plan to expand those benefits to low-income communities, to the people that are left behind by the 21st century economy, coal communities, fossil folks that are going to be out of jobs as fossil plays less of a role in our energy footprint, and in general broaden the availability of solutions to all Americans, not just the early adopters or those that can afford Tesla motor cars and such. And I have many policies to accomplish this. One would be, just to give you an example, remember the Cash for Clunkers program? Well, how about something like solar for scrap metal? Work to give loans to coal plants, to utilities that own coal plants, to shutter them and take out the polluting, carbon-producing product that they generate and give them a loan so that they can transform those assets into clean, renewable energy plants and storage factories, and put in job training for those that are left behind, because we can't leave people behind. America is better than that. We have the power, we have the technology, we just need the political will. And early indicators are very encouraging. Did you know that, for example, there are over 200,000 solar workers in this country, which is more than oil and coal combined? And these are not jobs where you're getting black lung, you're risking your health and safety. These are well-paying, safe jobs. And by the way, they're available to people that don't work in Palo Alto, that don't work in Silicon Valley, that don't know how to code, don't necessarily have the education you all have from MIT. And yet these are tickets to the middle class for an increasing array of Americans. And guess what? Those jobs stay here. The largest auto plant west of the Mississippi is headquartered right across the street here. And that wasn't the case before the Obama administration. And I will continue the very strong results and expand the progress we've made in the past 8 years. So I'm thrilled to be here. I have a lot more to say. I've got lots of policies, but I just want to leave you with the expressed desire: go out and vote. I need your vote, and I want you to vote for me.
And you'll do it just the way, Abraham Lincoln did it.
All right. Okay, save a little something. We have a little more to go here. Mr. Iyer, thank you for your patience. It's your turn.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff asked that we inject some levity into the presentation, and unfortunately, mine's rather scripted, and there's not much levity baked in. So let me just say thank you for the promotion from arrogant know-it-all, also known as a politician, to expert. I appreciate that very much. All right, and I'd like to thank the MIT Club of Northern California and Larry for organizing this event and for inviting me, apparently now an expert, to participate with my fellow panelists and gal panelist. I'm looking forward to a robust, insightful dialogue. I asked Jeff if I could just say a word or two about libertarianism. I think there's a few misconceptions. The goal for libertarians is maximum freedom and minimum government. The Libertarian Party has 3 simple core principles. Unlike the other parties, they're often unable to espouse them. First is non-initiation of force, and this is the most important one. And that's for any political, social, or organizational or personal purposes. So you do not initiate force. Second is tolerance of other beliefs and other people's pursuit of happiness. A lot of people do things that I don't approve of, but that's none of my business, and I don't expect government to be their nanny. Third is personal responsibility. You can't have maximum freedom without being accountable for harm done to yourself or to society. Libertarians believe that government's primary scope should be defense against foreign enemies, making judgment calls when liberties conflict, and holding parties accountable for harm caused. Importantly, government authority to use force, as I mentioned before, is the primary way to ensure compliance with laws, hence the need to keep that authority as limited as possible. And we've seen some of the unfortunate outcomes in news recently when we let government have too much authority to use force. Also note that libertarians define crime rather narrowly as behavior that harms or endangers others. So as I like to say, my freedom ends where yours begins. Just a little bit about my energy policy. Generally, libertarians have a strong preference for efficient markets and competition, not politically or emotionally driven government policies and winner picking, which is too often based on incomplete information and incomplete or biased benefit cost assessments. So now here are 5 sort of interwoven pillars of my energy policy. First, we need to move to performance-based return on investment for investor-owned utilities. This is in contrast to the conventional approach or business model where the return on investment is based on investments in capital equipment, which gives them a perverse incentive to invest in equipment rather than do other things. Most people are surprised to hear that utilities do not derive profit from sales of the electricity commodity itself. Second, efficient markets require appropriate price signals. Those price signals must include costs associated with negative environmental effects, what economists often call externalities. Some of those include damage to the natural environment generally, health costs, reduced agricultural production, accelerated infrastructure degradation, damage to private and public property, among others. So electricity pricing should also reflect time of use, that is electricity pricing should also reflect time of use, location, infrastructure capacity requirements and impacts, and reliability and quality. Third is elimination of all energy-related subsidies rather than establishing competing and offsetting subsidies. This includes so-called tax expenditures, if you've ever heard that term, which is really tax loopholes and write-offs, liability shields, and liability shields such as the Price-Anderson Act for nuclear power. And don't forget the below-market rate leasing of public lands to private firms for oil and gas extraction. Fourth, ideally, our primary fuel mix is diverse because, at least for now, there is no silver bullet. A more appropriate metaphor is silver buckshot. That includes renewables, nuclear energy, and hydrocarbon fuels. That would enable a better optimized energy system for diverse needs. Finally, global climate change must be on the agenda. Energy-related policy must A, involve rational approaches and analysis, not emotion-driven policies and that winner picking. B, they should be developed cooperatively among all countries to the extent possible and reasonable. And C, they should definitely include reasonable and balanced approaches that do not enable unfair competitive advantage among countries. Thank you.
Very good. So let's get into these topics a little bit more. In fact, Mr. Ayers brought the first one up. Maybe it's the issue of our age, which to my knowledge has not yet come up during the presidential debates, and that is the importance of climate change and how to address it. Just by way of introduction, in this last week, in fact, I think it was Monday, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau said that Canada would impose a tax on carbon emissions beginning in 2018. The German Senate last week confirmed that it will push laws and mandate all new car registrations to be electric by 2030, and they're going to make it virtually impossible to purchase benzene or diesel-powered cars. Last month, the Los Angeles City Council directed the Department of Water and Power to study how the city might move to 100% renewables. And we all know about California's cap and trade program, which celebrated its 10th anniversary, I should say, the passing of the law. So what's going on here? What about climate change? Is this a significant issue or not? I think we know where Mr. Iyer is on this. How about anyone else? Ms. Fund?
Well, I think it is the defining issue of our age. I actually have a slide that shows some interesting data from the Pew Foundation, because a lot of people feel that this is a partisan issue. It's not. It's a post-partisan issue.
Great. Could you bring it up, please? Thank you.
It's the second one.
Second one. Got it.
And if you just look at this, I don't care if you're red, blue, purple, or whatever. This shows across the board bipartisan support for clean energy. On the left, look at all of those who favor solar panel and wind, and who conversely don't favor fracking, nuclear power, and coal mining. And then on this other chart, you can see that even conservative Republicans to liberal Democrats love solar. And so this myth that this is an issue that divides us is just that. The data are in, and one of the reasons is what I mentioned in my opening remarks, is that people are seeing the benefits in their own community of quality job creation, of innovation, new companies starting. All of your children, many of them want to go work in the kinds of companies that are building our clean energy future, and they conversely don't want to go work in North Dakota in a fracking operation. So there are a lot of demographic and as well as political factors that are contributing to why this issue is front and center. And the good news is that when I'm elected, we will have the bipartisan support for the policies that will bring us to a 21st century clean energy economy.
So we know where the Green Party is on this, and I want to make sure you have a chance to say something, Mr. Roast. But let's go to the Republican side of the room, and see what Dr. Sweeney has to say.
Yes. As opposed to the rhetoric that we've heard in the past, we were the party of Lincoln. And one of the principles of telling the truth is recognizing that when science moves forward, you recognize science. And so one of the principles of the Republican Party should be that we recognize that human-caused climate change is real, it's significant, and we should be taking actions. Now, there are some people of my party who doubt that climate change is real and significant. But I think everybody must recognize, even if you doubt whether it's proved, that there's a risk. And we all insure against risks. I don't believe my house is going to burn down, but I have fire insurance. We need to protect against the risk if we don't believe that climate change is definitely true. I personally work enough with climate scientists that I'm absolutely convinced it's real and human caused and something that we can do about. Second point, we need to include both mitigation and adaptation. There is going to be a significant amount of changes associated with climate change, and we can't pretend that they're not going to happen. The sea level is going to rise. Our ports are going to be threatened. The severity of storms are going to be greater. So we need to be taking protective action and adapting to those things in order to protect the United States and the rest of the world for doing that. In addition, I think we need to be doing research and development in geoengineering, not because we want to implement it now, but because we need appropriate risk management strategies for the nation. It could be that global climate change progresses more rapidly than we believe it's going to. It could be more severe than is being predicted. In those cases, I believe it's going to be appropriate to take some of the risks of the geoengineering. But if we don't do the research and development, if we aren't prepared, we're not going to be able to deal with that situation if it arises. We need to move away from the government telling each state what they need to do from the Clean Power Plan and move to a revenue-neutral carbon tax. I believe that carbon tax should start in the order of somewhere between $25 and $50 per ton of carbon dioxide, and it should be increasing at the real risk-free rate in the economy in order to get intertemporal efficiency. So I believe that once we do that, we can start moving to having price mechanisms to cause the genius of the individual businesses and consumers to start making the investments for whatever those technologies are most efficient to deal with climate change. But while we have a zero price, we're sticking our head in the sand, and that's not appropriate for the party of the Republicans.
Okay, Dr. Sweeney, thank you. I just was checking, you're representing the Republican Party tonight, right?
The old Republican Party, not
So
the
now,
current
I want to go to another
Republican
panelist.
Party.
So just to remind everyone in the audience, a very clear statement in the Republican platform is we oppose any carbon tax. Mr. Roast, what would you like to say?
Well, unfortunately, I searched for a carbon tax in the Green Party platform today. I wasn't able to find any, but I do support it. And I actually found that British Columbia has a very successful carbon tax, and the millennials in Washington State have a proposition, I think it's 702, which is going to impose the...
Not just the millennials, it's got fairly broad-based support.
Yeah, broad-based support, but led by millennials, kind of. Anyway, youth vote.
Good. Mr. Iyer, would you like to add anything to this one on climate change?
Sure, I have a few thoughts. Climate change is definitely important. The concept of the tragedy of the commons is one of the most compelling and important topics of our day. And of course, that if you don't know what that is, it should be obvious, but it's the simple definition is it's parts of the environment that are shared among people and more broadly by animals and plant life. So even if one believes that the concerns are overblown, as we've heard here, the stakes are significant for future generations despite any uncertainty about the degree to which human activity is a primary cause of climate change. So we definitely need to move in that direction. My presentation tends to repeat a bit because my policy is pretty concise, but we definitely need to get the relationships with foreign countries going so that we can have a robust global cooperation on the issue. Without that, we're going to have a lot of parochialism and countries that are just looking out for their own best interests, and I'm not sure how far that's going to get us. Back to efficient energy pricing that includes externalities. Avoiding those market-distorting subsidies, especially in third-world countries, that's a particularly dramatic issue. In essence, that encourages or even subsidizes pollution and suboptimal resource selection and use. And then removing those institutional hurdles to increased use of renewables is important. We need to get on that. And that includes distributed electricity resources, especially photovoltaics, those fueled by liquid biofuels and possibly hydrogen fuel. And one comment on the carbon tax. As I've said previously, I think having a rational, auditable approach to establishing those taxes is my preferred way of going. But throwing out numbers that have no basis in rigorous economic analysis, I think isn't really going to help. Maybe those prices are too low, maybe they're too high, I don't know. But that's part of the problem we get into when government sets these policies using capricious and politically driven criteria.
So I know you want to continue on this subject, but I have to keep us moving. I've got a question from one of the earlier registrants I'd like to throw in, Ms. Fund. What's the most important achievement in the last 4 years for climate change policy? In other words, is it all dooms and gloom? What have we done?
Not at all. I think that we are witnessing the dramatic cost reductions in solar and wind so that these technologies are moving from the fringe to the mainstream. And that has been done by technological innovation, by investment, developing the iconic clean energy companies of the 21st century through investment, and of course by policy. And in the case of solar and wind, you've got the ITC and the PTC that have leveraged billions and billions of private dollars based on tax credits from the federal government. And while I agree with many of my colleagues here in terms of getting price signals correct, and a price on carbon would be preferable to subsidies, you know, we do live in a democracy. Just because you proclaim something that's reasonable doesn't mean it has any chance of coming true unless you engage in the political process. And so what I would like to acknowledge is that without the investment tax credit, we wouldn't have the 100% of new energy generation sources coming from renewables, which is what we have today. So there's huge reason for optimism, But we've got to go further. For example, we need a storage ITC. Storage is just as important in the generation of a clean energy grid. And right now, you're not able to, in certain circumstances, you can get a tax credit for it. But it would be just much simpler if we're not going to have a climate tax, and I don't think I can get there in the first 4 years of my administration. I will support a climate tax as soon as the political will can be rallied around it, because I don't just proclaim things, I work the system. So until that time, storage ITC would catalyze the growth of the storage sector,
Okay.
just as we've seen with solar.
Let's let Mr. Roost have the last word on this, because this is the Green Party's issue. In fact, if I understand correctly, your platform says that you don't favor the Paris Accord because it doesn't go far enough. Please.
I'm not familiar with that one, but what we do have, the third key value is human societies must function with the understanding that we are part of nature, not separate from nature. We must maintain an ecological balance and live within the ecological and resource limits of our communities and our planet. Greens want to stop runaway climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40% by 2020 and 95% by 2050 over 1990 levels. We have all the basic technology tools we need to make a great leap forward, and skip some stuff that Nancy already said. Since for transportation, we're looking at cutting its life cycle cost per mile traveled by more than half with renewable energy, with electricity instead of fossil fuels. Everywhere you look, from bicycles to cargo ships and airplanes, battery-powered electric motors will dominate within 10 years, at least in new construction. The second piece, slashing emissions from agriculture, cement, water management, and manufacturing, as well as transportation and electricity generation. Pulling CO2 back out of the air, both by technology like Opus 12, and literally everyone rolling up their sleeves and trying their hand at permaculture and other forms of organic gardening, as well as managed harvesting of some of the 85,000 edible wild plants on our planet. We get 80% of our calories from 15 plants, and that's not a recipe for resilience. We basically have been pulled away from any kind of relationship in nature by industrial agriculture, which was pushed in the 50s by Earl Butz, who said, get big or get out. That has led us to agriculture being maybe 20% of carbon, I'm not sure.
It's 24% globally and 9% in the United States.
All right. Thank you.
Do I have a chance to rebut the what is apparently the public, but maybe not the private position of my Democratic opponent?
No.
Okay. I'll get this slide up later and rebut it at a different part of the section.
Thank you for your understanding. We're going to try and keep moving. We've got a couple more topics we want to get through. The second topic I've got is energy infrastructure for the 21st century and beyond. I read something recently. I'd like to just briefly read it for you. Our nation's interstate electric transmission systems long been a catalyst for developing and delivering low-cost energy while spurring economic growth throughout the United States. The grid is aging, vulnerable to cyber and terrorist attacks, and unprepared to serve our energy needs of tomorrow. This particular party platform supports expedited siting process and the thoughtful expansion of the grid so that customers and businesses continue to have access to affordable and reliable electricity. Can we all agree on that? Okay, that's from the Republican platform. So, yes. So, Dr. Sweeney, would you like to talk a little bit about infrastructure for the 21st century?
Yes, I'll try to keep this to about 4 points. But there's a lot more infrastructure than one. Cybersecurity of the electricity grid needs enhancing. We are vulnerable, and if you go back to the energy policy triangle where you pay attention to security, cybersecurity of the grid has a long ways to go, and we need to work on it. Second, as we move to the new forms of supplies of energy, we're going to want to move electricity from region to region much more than we currently do now. We need to expand the regional transmission organizations. Particularly California, we're having an imbalanced market that's going a little north and mostly east. What we really need to do is be integrating the Pacific Northwest with the hydropower there and California as we bring in renewables. We need regional transmission organizations, but that's not something the federal government should be doing. That's something that the regions themselves should be moving towards under the guidance and prodding of FERC and the supervision, but it's going to have to be done in a cooperative way between those regions. We need to create more regional resiliency. We saw what happened after Sandy and how long the infrastructure was down. We can start developing regional resiliency with microgrids, distributed generation, perhaps linked to the military bases and ports, so we don't have the type of extended outages from Sandy. Again, paying attention to really the security issues. And we've got to promote free trade independent of what my Democratic opponent who's opposed to TPP, at least in her public statements, not her private statements, fortunately. But we need to promote North American free trade as opposed to what another Republican has said in the past. By allowing expansion of the grid and oil transmission facilities, including the Keystone XL pipeline, the North American Free Trade Agreement, contrary to what's been stated, has been actually economically very valuable for all three nations. And it promoted economic growth and energy independence and security. Must not be doing things that get in the way of free trade throughout the North American hemisphere. So we need to be able to develop infrastructure that allows that further trade.
Thank you, Dr. Sweeney. I know Ms. Fund's ready to go. Any issue here that concerns the Libertarian Party?
Well, I wouldn't call it a particularly libertarian point of view. It's more of a free market, price-based and incentives-based approach. But and originally the question posed was about the grid of the 21st century. So that's kind of what I was answering. But first, consider that most cost for electricity is related to the infrastructure. That is the capacity to generate, transmit, and distribute the electricity. And recall that I said that utilities make money by investing in equipment. They don't make money by selling electricity per se, which most people are surprised to hear. So the concept of performance-based ROI for investor-owned energy utilities is critical given its potential to provide important incentives for energy utilities to provide service and energy optimized on both cost and benefit, to innovate, which they don't have much of an incentive to do now, and to be good stewards of the environment. And I think I'm going to digress just for a minute and give you an example of the criteria that I think would be involved in performance-based ROI rather than investment and equipment-based. That would be service, in no particular order, service reliability, service quality, environmental stewardship, air, water, oceans, and land, customer satisfaction, reasonable prices in quotes, infrastructure asset utilization, getting the most out of the wires and transformers we have, fuel and end-use efficiency, a combination of uncertainty and risk. They do a little bit of that, but that's not nearly enough for the future. Innovation and new technology acceptance, transparency, fuel diversity, data management, use and security, community relations, infrastructure security, and resilience. And one last thing, the richer pricing provides incentives for more efficacious energy use and reduced infrastructure capacity requirements.
Okay, well, the grid is only one part of the infrastructure.
That is.
What about the transportation sector? Does anyone have anything they'd like to add about that? Mr. Roast?
Yep. Okay. Fully fund and finance mass development of all kinds of battery electric vehicles. Between 2018 and 2020, we'll no longer have credible range anxiety. Also, mid-range electric cars will cost no more than gas to purchase and a fraction as much to operate. And they'll be far more fun to drive unless you get off on engine roar, so let's get with the program. So skipping that other part. So transit. We need to shift people from private automobiles to transit by making transit attractive and making it go where it needs to go. We know that the 101's backed up right now. An elevated bidirectional monorail system with ultralight materials over the median of Highway 101 would fix that a lot. And bidirectional means close headways between the vehicles because they're going this way. So you can get high volume. Facebook is paying $1 million for a study of the Dumbarton Bridge, and that's the old Dumbarton Rail Bridge, that is, to bring it back. I'd like to see rail, and then the bidirectional monorail, and then bicycle and pedestrian walkways, and all of that being built on reconstructed foundations, which could be done with a structure I like. Then Green Party urges a policy emphasizing use of mass transit and alternatives to automobile and truck. They're encouraging rail, using more rail, and that'll take a little bit of coordinating.
All right. Is that the big issue, Ms. Fund? Mass transit and building out the EV charging infrastructure? Is that what we need to do here going forward?
Well, that's where we are today. Where we need to be in the future is to acknowledge it's actually another trifecta. It's in terms of transportation, it's electrification, it's mobility, and it's sharing. We're not going to all own cars that sit in our driveways for 80% of their useful life going forward. We don't need to do that. With autonomous drive and the electrification of the grid, you'll be able to have driverless cars that you can use and turn transportation into a service, not just an asset that is underutilized. And so in order to do that, we need to invest in next-gen mapping, satellite imagery. There are a lot of, the good news is that there are a lot of technical advances that are required to get us to that transportation of the future, and all of this will create jobs along the way. And so I'm very optimistic about the ability of transportation to be decarbonized. But for that, to your point earlier, we do need a green grid, and we need regional transfers of renewable energy flows that allow us to not have to build peaker plants anytime we put up a wind farm. We shouldn't be building peaker plants as storage comes into play and as we get a regional grid established. So there are a lot of ways that we can optimize for both quality, performance, and reliability at the same time that we're driving out carbon. I would just like to say to my opponent from the Republican Party, I do agree with many of the points that he made relating to the role of regions in getting us to a clean energy future. States have really led the way here, but his characterization of the trade plan is something that I'm opposed to or I'm in favor of. All I want is a trade plan that lifts up workers and doesn't leave them behind. Not all of us have the luxury of being tenured professors at Stanford.
Well, that may be in jeopardy after tonight. Dr. Sweeney, can we talk about infrastructure?
Let me, in transportation infrastructure, my opponent and I in real life made some different decisions. She invested in Tesla and I didn't.
Are we done?
No, that was meant to be a compliment, but I just want to give just a fact that we've learned recently, and I think you think of big transitions in the transportation sector and the energy sector as taking a long time. I think that there is some chance that we can go to electrification of vehicles amazingly faster than almost anybody believes. One bit of research that I did recently with a colleague looking at the transition to diesel electric from steam locomotives. Different thing. It took about 100 years of transition from wood to coal and then some fuel oil. And then a disruptive technology that was electric. A diesel electric trains were introduced. In 1945, the market share of fuels for locomotives by diesel electrics was about zero, to the first decimal point, about 0%. 12 years later, it was 99%. Diesel locomotives, even though the locomotives have 30 or 40-year lives, the whole fuel usage of that industry in 12 years, starting from right after World War II to 1957, went from zero market share to 100%, with the purchase of new locomotives moving from steam to electric, going much faster than that. I don't know that electric vehicles that's going to happen, but it's not unthinkable. And she made a better decision than I did when she invested in Tesla.
Yeah,
She did one thing right.
I have a feeling that wasn't the only thing. Mr. Roos,
think you're right.
do you think it can move quickly as well? And then we're going to move on to our next topic.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, Chasm Theory of Marketing, go read it. Tornado of demand. When the batteries are about 2 years from now or 3 years from now, you should see a tornado of demand in switch from one to the other. And yeah, it should, I come up with the same number. I come up with 10 or 12 years. If we do it right, we can actually completely get rid of fossil fuels and probably nuclear at the same time.
How many of you here drive an electric vehicle? Yeah, it's happening. So I'm going to move us to another topic, just trying to keep us going. Let's talk about let's move to policy here. Talk about the role of government in advancing energy markets and implementing energy policy. So, Mr. Iyer, I'll turn to you first. This question comes, another one from a registrant. What state and federal policies can meaningfully support the development of microgrids across the nation?
Well, first, here we go again, but I'm going to be a little repetitive. I apologize. I definitely think that this pricing business is really important, including environmental externalities. I mean, first and foremost, I think government's role is to enable a robust and rich energy marketplace. That would be my fundamental principle. Explicit pricing, elimination of all types of subsidies, and emotionally and politically based winner picking, which we've already heard a bit of here tonight. Providing means to hold polluters accountable for harm caused. Policies that enable electricity price differentiation, as I mentioned before, and environmentally sound and competitively bid energy resource extraction and generation on public lands. And also, it's clear that the government is a very large energy user, so they could use their market pull to influence the marketplace that way, and I think they're doing some of that. And then rather than the typical command and control approaches such as laws, regulations, government could help lead and catalyze development of energy-related best practices and standards. So, but back to the question about microgrids, I believe the most important thing is for the regulators to move to this performance-based rate making so that the utilities have the incentive to pick the microgrids when that's the best way to go, rather than me coming up with any particular prescriptive policies or regulations.
So I don't expect to answer.
I believe that the microgrids have a big role to play in the grid of the future, but
But it sounds like in a regulated environment, though.
well, we're talking primarily about investor-owned utilities, which they serve about 75% of the electricity demand in the country. So that's the predominant marketplace for it, but also the cooperatives and the municipals do the same thing. All I'm saying is, rather than me saying what the criteria would be for utilities to use microgrids, I would rather unleash their innovation and let them do the best job they know in their grid. I don't know the grid as well as the power engineers do out in the periphery. So I would like to unleash that innovation within utilities, and right now they're completely risk averse because of this old business model.
Right now, it's been going on for a long time. Ms. Fund?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Could you get the map up so that we can look at that. In terms of microgrids, it's almost what we saw with solar 10 years ago. And policy does make a difference. You can't just unregulate utilities one day and expect everything to function well the next. So I agree that we need reforms. But
Is that the right?
yes, it is. Thank you. But we already have a great example of how policy can shape market growth. And we all know that California is the leader. If I weren't running for president, I'd probably run for governor of California. Because it has exhibited leadership, and of course you have played a very critical role in this, our moderator has over the years. So this map just shows you, and what California did for solar was things like an RPS very early on, a million solar roofs rebate program that was a 10-year rebate that went away as scale was implemented, net metering, just really had a combination of policies that encouraged solar to develop. And so as a result, we're the third largest per capita solar generator in the country, and the only really large state in that three. The first are Arizona and Hawaii. I'm sorry, not Arizona, Nevada. So what we did here is if you just take 10 large states and ones that have a lot of population but also are near or at grid parity, and all you did was ask them to do what California has done. Get the same ratio of solar per capita in New York, in Florida, in these places where a lot of people live. And if we did that and nothing else, we would double the amount of solar in this country.
So are you saying that we should do that by federal mandate or states?
What we can do is encourage states to, through loan programs, through bond issues. Virginia has such a program called Virginia Saves. It's written up in our policy playbook here. To be bolder in the way that they encourage the growth of solar. And with microgrids, it's the same. We're already seeing that a bill was passed by Assemblyman Skinner in 2010 to implement more storage. CPUC Commissioner Carla Peterman, who happens to be a Rhodes Scholar, by the way, she implemented a 1,600 megawatt storage mandate in 2013. And lo and behold, SoCal Edison has 90 megawatts to one company, one of our investments, Advanced Microgrid Solutions, building microgrids. So it isn't rocket science. I do have an investment in that area if we want to talk about that in a future debate.
Another thing she did correct, perhaps.
Could I interject one thing? Rather than taking giant steps like mandating storage, as a libertarian, one of the things I'd like to see the regulators do is get out of the way and at least make it so that there's no hurdles to deployment of microgrid technologies, particularly energy storage and distributed generation.
That is a dream. That is a dream.
Well,
because
then the
there are hurdles.
then
the regulations you speak of are the hurdles, and so if you don't push the utilities
forgive me, but
to do
the technologies that
you'll
make
be
up
one of these
microgrids
laggard states.
aren't even in the menu of options for the power engineers currently. I'm talking about those baby steps that get us in the right direction, as well as the performance-based rate making. But if the regulations preclude use of these technologies, the first step should be to figure out how to make the regulations have the Velcro so that the power engineers in the utilities have the permission, if you will, and can take the risk to deploy these new technologies.
Let's turn to the Republican Party, the voice of reason here.
Yes. Could you put up slide number 3, my third slide? On this. And part of the voice of reason is looking what the facts actually are.
I was just kidding, Jim, when I said that.
And I was just kidding about the facts too. Oh, no, I'm not the actual candidate. I want to bring this to people's attention. This takes a little explaining. This is carbon dioxide per dollar of GDP. Carbon dioxide per dollar of GDP has declined since the time of the oil crisis in 1973 by 61%. It's only 29% of what it was before. That doesn't mean carbon dioxide has decreased. The economy's grown. What this means is the decarbonization of the economy means we can have a robustly growing economy, more robustly than it's grown under her administrations. You can have a robustly
I haven't been
growing...
elected yet.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You won't be. You can have a robustly growing economy and having a decrease in carbon dioxide, and that's if you decarbonize the economy, carbon per unit of GDP. This goes back, you had the right slide up.
I'm trying to get so people can see the bottom of the slide.
You're supposed to start.
You can't see
You're
anything.
supposed to start sniffing now.
Only for my private conversations. It starts as 1 in 1973 and goes down to 73%. But I want to look at the different components. You know, if you click on slideshow from the current slide, that would actually do it.
Yeah,
I mean, the moderator sometimes, you were part of the government, so you need to know how to be told how to use this technology. Okay. Actually, let me stand up to show this.
That's against the rules.
Maybe I'll hover in back of you. If you look at the blue, that was the decarbonization that was happening before the energy crisis in 1973. The green is the enhanced energy efficiency since the energy crisis. The blue plus the green together tells us how we've decarbonized the economy because of reduced intensity of using energy in the economy. The black is a result of the decarbonization of our economy because of the combination of wind plus solar, her things, plus nuclear power, plus fracking for natural gas, plus geothermal, plus hydropower, all together account for this much of the decarbonization. That much is on the demand side of the energy market. Half of this is nuclear power. So the things that she's talking about so far have been insignificant for decarbonizing the economy. I sure hope they are dominant in the future, but so far the facts are they have not been very important for decarbonizing the economy relative to the demand side of the market. And I got to get the chance for advertising. This is all documented in the book, so it's both private and public conversation as opposed to what you may see.
Thank you, Dr. Sweeney. I think we'll wait for the video to come out. Mr. Roast.
Thank you. So the first line of the Green Party's energy plank is conservation, efficiency, research and development, and renewable energy sources are essential elements of our proposed policy. It also states phase out fossil fuels and energy source to the greatest extent possible and convert to renewable resources. And this has one of the consequences of this policy is that the total volume of chemical feedstocks available is likely to be significantly reduced when we end the use of fossil fuels for electricity and transportation. That means we will need to switch to new sources of the chemical feedstocks we use today, most of which come from oil. We need to keep this in mind as we fine-tune the balance among various sources of renewable energy and as we capture and sequester lots of carbon. Let's see, there was another piece too. The energy mix, no oil, gas, coal, or nuclear, lots of energy efficiency, solar, wind, run-of-stream hydro, wave, tide, current, and some human energy. That's the Green New Deal energy policy, pretty in a nutshell.
All right. So thank you. In the interest of time, we're gonna go to our last topic so we can, at 9 o'clock, turn over to audience question and answer, and that is, let's talk about the best energy policies to grow the U.S. economy. We've been discussing some of them, let me just ask a couple of fundamental questions, and I just want a yes or no answer, if that's possible, from each of you. Talking about the best energy policy to grow the U.S. economy, left to right here, Mr. Iyer, do we have a responsibility to our children to leave the planet a better place than when we took over?
Of course.
It's fun?
Yes.
Absolutely.
One of the conservative principles
Dr. Sweeney?
is to conserve what's important, and a planet is very important to
about
us.
him.
Yes,
Dr. Sweeney, that was a yes?
that was a profoundly
Okay,
yes.
we'll take you out of the next question so we don't have to put up with that. Should the U.S. be world leaders in the energy industry, including the export of energy and energy-related products and services?
That's not up to me, nor do I think government should choose that as a policy. But if it happens as a matter of fact, then that's fine.
Not necessarily.
Not only should we're doing that. The leading electric car company happens to be, as I said, across the street, and that was based on both innovation and policy.
Mr. Roast?
Absolutely yes.
We need free trade, and if it happens to be an energy, okay, but if it's not an energy, I don't care.
Okay, so how do we reconcile our concern for the planet and our efforts to exploit its resources? We're talking about energy policy here. How do you reconcile these two things? Ms. Fund, go ahead.
It's a false trade-off. The 20th century was characterized by extractive technologies driving our energy generation and use. We don't need to do that anymore. We can use renewable energy, wind, solar. Someday we'll be using wave energy through innovation and R&D, coupled with storage and policies that reward for that correctly price extractive technologies so that they become the small part of the graph rather than the large part of the graph.
Okay.
So it really isn't that complicated.
Mr. Iyer, you wouldn't necessarily advocate for one technology over another, would you?
No, in fact, just the opposite. I have my preferences, but I won't share them with anyone, so you don't see my bias. But what I'm for is a marketplace that's priced in such a way that the choices are made by the marketplace and based on free enterprise and competitive forces rather than capricious politicians that use things like how many votes it's going to get, whether or not they're manufactured in my district, whether I happen to like it or dislike it,
But we're
whether it's
talking
something
about-
my opponent likes or dislikes.
We're talking about the impact on the planet. And so what if
Well,
there's...
I've given you my policy,
the
the outlines
externalities.
of my policy, certainly to the extent people are harming the environment, and I don't know how to set the exact number for such a
Gotcha.
thing. That's something economists can and could do for us. What I'm saying is the market forces, to me, are the most efficacious way to get us where we want to go in the shortest period of time.
Mr. Roast, how you would, of course, I would think, advocate for green technologies, correct? How do you reconcile all of this? How do you reconcile what we just heard from Mr. Iyer about market forces versus advocating for one technology
That
over
include
another?
accountability for harm done to the environment and to fellow humans.
Sorry.
Yeah, I learned about externalities about 50 years ago, and I agree. The part of the big deal here is that the total externalities of the fossil fuel industry are something like $5 trillion a year. And it's
So be it.
4 or 5 times the total subsidies to the renewable energy industry. And if we, and part of the reason for that is that they skate by without being made to pay for all the damage they're doing, both in terms of direct toxic pollution, asthma, and all that.
And they win at the subsidy game.
The climate change, climate disruption, and all the impacts that's going to. And the people that did that study said actually that understates the full impacts of destroying our civilization. Anyway, they didn't phrase it that way, but that's how I phrase it. So if we actually make a level playing field, it's no contest. The nuclear and coal, all the fossil fuel goes away, nuclear goes away, and it's head-on, full court press with renewable energy on a cost basis as well, and especially for a life cycle cost basis. And one of the big things people don't realize is that when we do get rid of the fossil fuels, we will have cut out 10% roughly of the global cost of the global economy in terms of costs. We will have, in other words, about 9% or 11% more disposable income for this planet when we no longer pay for fossil fuels after we finish financing the equipment that will provide the free energy.
So, Dr. Sweeney, the Republican Party platform says the environment's too important to be left to radical environmentalists.
Well, unfortunately, I'm illiterate, so I never read this.
So it's all of the above?
But what I'm gratified by is that the Libertarians have understood a position absolutely correctly, and it comports exactly with what I think the Republican position should be. One,
Should you be happy?
Take what I can get.
One, we need pricing policies on the externalities. I believe in the polluter pay policy, and it's taking responsibility for your own actions. If you pollute, you should be paying enough money to compensate for that, and that moves the system away from that. I believe the most effective way is a revenue-neutral carbon tax. I have a range that I believe it should be in based upon my studies of the best estimates of the incremental damages of carbon dioxide, between $25 and $50 per ton of carbon dioxide now, and going into rising at the real rate of interest. But if evidence shows it should be higher, good, make it a higher tax. And then you got to get rid of all the subsidies, including for wind and solar, and get rid of the subsidies for oil and gas. We want a subsidy-free with a polluter pay principle on this, and let the genius of the market move us forward.
Ms. Fund, are you going to invest in companies that don't provide investment tax credits, production tax credits?
I completely agree. If oil and gas and nuclear, if those subsidies are removed, then remove them all. You know, if you're an oil executive, be careful what you wish for, because renewables, as you point out, are free.
Let's talk about nuclear. A registrant asked this question: is there a role for nuclear fission in the energy generation mix? And I'll throw in large hydroelectric too, because I've come across that in a few of the party platforms. Is there a role for nuclear? Is there a role for large hydro?
I believe that obviously we're not going to get rid of old uneconomic nuclear plants overnight, but they are heavily subsidized. The Price-Anderson Act that you mentioned is a huge, basically free insurance. And as prices of renewables come down, nuclear plants are not able to keep up. And so we do need some kind of rationalization. I think, again, California is leading by having just announced that the Diablo Canyon will be closed, and so we are going nuclear free. And what's making up for nuclear, as it did with San Onofre, the plant down south that was shuttered, is more renewable energy, and storage is playing a critical role in replacing those assets. So I think it's very clear that we can live without nuclear. It doesn't mean we can shut them down overnight. It doesn't mean that someday there will be better nuclear that's cheaper, better, faster, safer. I think that's an R&D effort, but it's not today. And regarding hydro, we have all kinds of issues relating to drought and natural landscapes. And the question is, do we need more dams, and would they ever be able to be permitted?
Mr. Roast, I think you wanted to say something on this.
Yeah, on nuclear power, the Green Party is opposed to it, of course. And a recent study found that for the UK, the government's own data shows the UK to be blessed with abundant, secure, and competitive renewable energy resources. In a world turning much more to renewables than nuclear power, Britain might be expected to be taking a lead in these new technologies, yet a greater priority in UK policymaking appears to lie in maintaining nuclear submarine capabilities. According to the researchers, other policy documents on the military side reveal intense pressures for strong government support for skills and training, design and manufacturing, and research and regulatory capabilities linking with the civil nuclear industry. Let's say this whole package or sick ruler system could be the end of all life on Earth far faster than runaway climate chaos. So it is anathema to the Green Party. That is, it's a thing detested or loathed, a thing accursed or consigned to damnation or destruction, and a subject of divine punishment.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sweeney, would you like to add anything about nuclear?
Yes, this is where I have to agree with my Democratic opponent on here in the following sense. My answer to this question depends upon which audience I'm talking to. But it also depends upon which side of the bed I get off in the morning. Nuclear power provides a base load power that is not available from the solar, the intermittent resources, and it gives you, there's a particular value for that dependable base load power. What is killing nuclear power in the United States now, though, is really an issue of cost. It is a more costly technology than the alternatives, more costly than natural gas, more costly than wind and solar, so that the economics are killing it. Does that always have to be the case? With the small modular nuclear reactors, we may be able to move forward to a nuclear future which is both inherently safe and lower cost. I don't know. I do know that the federal government has backed off too much on research and development expenditures and needs to get back into R&D much more fully than it has. So there could be breakthroughs that make that an important part of the future. I don't view it as a religious notion. It's really an issue of the security that you get from that versus the economics, where the economics of nuclear just isn't very good right now.
Mr. Roast, you wanted to add something short, please?
Yeah. So 19 cents plus for Hinkley, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cents for solar and wind. Within 3
Hinkley
years,
is a nuclear generating station under construction in England.
Yeah. Within 2 or 3 to 5 years, we're looking at 1 cent or thereabouts per kilowatt hour levelized cost for battery storage.
Mr. Iyer?
Several points. First of all, we need a benefit and cost assessment. Dr. Sweeney pointed out some of the advantages of nuclear energy. I'm not ready to write it off entirely. He mentioned the modular designs, which are factory built, and they have much greater safety mechanisms built in to the design than the old-fashioned one-off plants that we're familiar with now. They're smaller as well. So I'm not precluding it, and nor am I picking it, but certainly in my opinion, it has to be in the mix because of the baseload implications that were mentioned. And we need to do a benefit cost assessment, not just a levelized cost assessment. And I'll leave it at that. So, bulk hydro in the United States is dead, but as we've seen in parts of the developing world, the governments have made a different decision. And I think that moving forward, it's clear that large hydroelectric plants are very harmful to the environment. But that does not preclude pumped hydroelectric storage, which is an old and familiar and reliable technology that's going to be, I think, a big part of our renewable energy, our total electric power mix for the future.
So let's do this. Let's go, thank you all very much. Let's go to the audience question and answer. I'm just trying to keep us on schedule, and I apologize that we're moving so quickly. I've got a microphone here, and I'm just going to we'll go back and forth in the audience. Go ahead and yes. And please stand and state your name.
Hi, I'm Luke Postoyevsky.
Please.
And so about a year ago, Bill Gates announced an initiative called the Breakthrough Energy Coalition, which appears to be in formation now to invest $2 billion of his own money and perhaps with 30 other signatories, something closer to $4 or $5 billion in the very early stages, presumably seed and Series A stages of potentially breakthrough energy solutions. From your respective party positions, what do you think the government should have, if any, role in leveraging that kind of private capital?
Good, thank you.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of talk about the Breakthrough Initiative and should we just deploy more versus spend so much on early stage. My answer is all of the above. We need the early stage, and we should be deploying more. And I think that's where the private sector and the government, but mostly the private sector, if they're going to come up with some interesting early stage companies that do solve problems in a cost-effective way, then they're going to attract follow-on investment, and we'll be able to develop next generation wind, solar, wave, whatever it is that they are working on. So I think a lot has been made, and he was criticized for saying we need miracles. But what people don't understand is that the entrepreneurs in the room understand that it's a miracle every day your company survives when you're taking on centuries-old incumbents. So we need it all.
Yeah. From the Green Party platform, we need national, state, and local governments to together pump an infusion of trillions of dollars into a global World War II scale Green New Deal, which will rebuild our entire civil infrastructure to run on renewable energy and mass transit by somewhere between 2030 and 2040. That's from the platform.
Dr. Sweeney?
Could you put up slide number 3 for mine? No, not slide number 3, not slide number 4. And as part of my answer to this question, thank you for giving me an opportunity to put up a slide I laboriously developed for this. Okay. First thing, the federal government should stand up and applaud and applaud loudly and support the type of activities. But there is a role that is complementary to that, and that's in the basic research and development, the basic research as well as really early stage development that allows such initiatives to move forward. This graph shows the trends in non-defense R&D for the federal government by function, and if you look at this energy, 1973, 74 after the crisis, and this is inflation-adjusted dollars, but this is not as a fraction of the economy. This is total amount. That's what it used to be. This is what it's shrunk to now. We have greatly moved away from the fundamental research that allows us to develop those technologies that the private sector can move forward to. So the federal government should cheer those initiatives, should cheer on the private sector, should cheer on the venture capitalists, but they should be doing their part more than they're doing instead of backing away from research and development in energy.
So, Mr. Iyer, do you want to add, or can we go to another question?
I think it's important to say one of the key differences between most political philosophies and parties and libertarians is that we have pretty limited faith in government. And it's not government per se, it's a human nature thing. So it's not obvious to me that the smart people in Washington, D.C. are going to be able to come up with the right policies and to pick the right technologies. I've been at this for 30 years now, and I can tell you I'm a dreadful winner picker. So I like to make sure that we have a rich portfolio of alternatives until we have some killer app like nuclear fusion. We have to keep our eyes open, keep the federal government out of it, and in fact I would say they need to do a little work to get out of the way of innovation and entrepreneurialism.
Let's take another question. Let's keep moving. Back of the room, please stand, identify yourself, Mr. Grant.
Hi, my name's Paul Grant. In full disclosure, I have to say that I got my advanced degrees from a divinity school a few miles up Mass Avenue from that trade school on the charts.
Please ask a question.
I'll let that sink in. The question is, in a Nature paper in 2004 and in a Scientific American article in 2006, Chauncey Starr, the founder of EPRI and considered the father of the nuclear power industry worldwide, he and I propose an ideal energy society based on a symbiosis of nuclear, hydrogen, superconductivity, and non-eco-invasive renewables. An example of the latter is solar roofs. And I'm a physicist, and we think in ideal terms. So without getting into the actual details of small nuclear power plants, which are on the horizon, what do you think of that idea in general?
Anybody want to try and answer?
Well, I think we've all been saying that you know, why build something elaborate and that you're going to have to spend years getting to proof of concept and driving down costs when you have a very cost-effective transition today where the costs have come down 70% in the last 3 or 4 years.
Talking about solar photovoltaics.
And also wind and storage, as you point out, promises to come down and be accessible in cost. Where you don't have any fuel concerns, you don't have permitting issues anywhere near as strong as you would with these other approaches. And plus, remember that graph I showed? The public loves these, and so it's fine if you have these other viewpoints, but you've got to, the proof is, do people want that? And right now, what they want is what was on that graph.
Okay, you all don't have to weigh in. I'm looking to get as many questions in as I can. Please, identify yourself.
Evening, my name is John Ryan. Could we take a look again at the third slide, Dr. Sweeney's?
Now I'm working for you too, John.
I just want to make a point, or ask, probably have a question embedded in it, but something I
Is that the R&D
discerned from
slide?
it. No, it's not the R&D slide.
The decarbonization slide.
So this efficiency, or this less burden of carbon intensity, is coincident in time with what I'm going to call the deindustrialization of the country. And you, in your introduction, said we need to pay attention to both supply and demand. So with the if that's true, deindustrialization contributes to the fact that we're more of a service economy and therefore less carbon dioxide intensity. That's a pattern that's not going to be able to be repeatable indefinitely, or maybe not even very much longer. And if your platform as a Republican, or even the Democratic platform, is to reintroduce industrialization and jobs associated with that, there's actually going to be either a flattening or perhaps a reversal of that influence. But my question, which is a little bit on a different perspective, is I don't know the data, and I hope some of you do, that the regulatory burden on nuclear in the US seems to be a lot higher than it is in Europe or would be through much of Asia. And so when you consider the cost-benefit analysis, when you've got what some people might think is over-regulation, how do you come to good decision-making about the role of nuclear going forward?
So I think we can drop the slide projector, correct?
Well, no. I'd
Oh, you
like
need this? Go
slide
ahead.
5 because I want to respond to the preamble to the question. Slide 5 of mine, because what you
Just so everybody knows, this
is
is Jim's last slide, so there won't be any.
maybe not. No, yeah. This is, your assertion is what this is the trends in consumption of energy by the 4 sectors: industrial, transportation, residential, and commercial. What you're talking about is what happened in the industrial sector. We use as much energy in the industrial sector as we used in 1973. You can say, what caused that? First, is it because industry has collapsed in the United States? The statistics say it has not collapsed. It has continued to grow up until 1973 or 4 as fast as it did before, and the energy use has not flattened out, wiggled. So that of the industrial sector, of that segment, you can econometrically break into between 2 things. Industry making different things and selling different commodities versus making the same type of commodities more efficiently. That turned out in the industrial sector is about half and half between those 2. So that's in that sector. In the transportation, residential, and commercial, it has nothing to do with the industry sector. So your preamble assumes, it talks about just one element of what we gave it energy efficiency, less than a quarter of the total. And so I disagree with the premise of your question. And then your question yourself, somebody else can answer.
Well, I'll finish. I think your assertion that nuclear is over-regulated compared to other countries in this country is specious. You don't have any evidence for that. And if you look at EDF, which is the largest, the French company that has the largest fleet of nuclear plants in the world, and you look at what they're doing, they're completely transitioning out of nuclear, and they're investing in renewables and clean energy, not because they're do-gooders or because they want the world to be a better place, although I'm sure many of them do, but because of the economics and the ability to make more money. I mean, this should make you happy, Dr. Sweeney.
Well, it makes you happy too, making a lot more money. As I remember, you got rich from your speeches.
Well, I'm not going to directly reply to that, but getting rich is the American way as far as your party is concerned. But at any rate,
we digress.
The people that are experts in nuclear, many of them are exiting. And if you want to talk about over-regulated, look at Japan and look at the decisions they're making. So there is no evidence to suggest that the over-regulation is a distinctly American phenomenon.
So, Mr. Roast, I saw you agreeing. Unless you have something you want to add, I'll move to another question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we're on the other side of the room. Come forward. Let's try some of the folks towards the front. We haven't had a woman ask a question. I think we should be equal in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Diana Sankovic, and my question pertains to both infrastructure limitations as it relates to the addition of intermittent sources of renewables to the grid, as well as policy associated with that. So to be more specific, as we add sources such as solar and wind to our infrastructure, which was never built to handle two-way sources of energy, and creates peak load issues and other uncertainty to the power management at the macro level. Meantime, the distribution mix that is mandated by law differs greatly now between different parts of the United States, whether it be at the state or regional level. And so how, on the policymaking end, can we improve both the scale and political certainty to create more space for solutions to arise to handle this problem of trying to accommodate the infrastructure investment needed for wind and solar to take a bigger chunk of the mix?
Mr.
Very
Roast.
simple policy would be storage. So by putting enough storage in, and since it's going to be, it already is at available. It's like the automobile base. From LG Chem and Panasonic, that those batteries already well cheaper, well into the price of the stationary batteries from other companies. It'll go way down below that. So we're going to see under $100 a kilowatt hour, where it's going to be very possible to have all the battery storage you need for all the wind, all the solar, and all the microgrids, all of that, and all the homes that want to avoid peak charges and stuff like that in businesses. It's going to be really easy to manage the electric grid by using battery storage to meter out energy when it's needed.
Well,
Wait, excuse me. Let me go to Mr. Iyer. This is his field, and he hasn't spoken for a while.
Well, yeah, I bet my career on energy storage. I think it's wonderful. I think it's a really important part of the mix. But the Green Party gentleman trivializes what it's going to take for us to get lots of storage out there, and that's only part of the solution. Back to the markets thing, we need an overhaul of the energy market, the electricity marketplace generally, the way the ISOs price and dispatch the electricity. We need to get to performance-based rate making in the utilities so that they have the incentive to try to find the solutions. We don't know. I work with people all the time that are in this business. It is not a trivial exercise, and we really need to enable the utilities to do this on their terms rather than us prescribing all kinds of solutions that may or may not be the right ones. And it's going to be incremental, by the way. I don't think we're going to see this overnight. Some folks have said we can do it in a few years, but the electrical grid has been in place for 100 years. The equipment goes away at a rate of about 2.5% a year. The utilities have this embedded investment in all this equipment, and they don't want to rip it out and replace it with new stuff. So what we've got now is we have to find a way to transition from the old grid to the new grid, and it's a lot more complicated than just putting a bunch of storage out in the periphery, which is going to be a big part of the solution, no doubt about it, and I believe that.
Thank you, Ms. Fund. Go ahead.
Certainly, the
That's right.
paying for performance is a regulatory discussion that's happening now in many states, including this one and New York. So these are all great ideas. But the basic premise of the intermittency can be solved by storage, but that's not even where we're headed. We're heading towards eliminating the concept of baseload power, because really what we're going to do is interstitiate demand response, real-time demand response with renewables and batteries, so that we are intelligently assembling and reacting to the data so that we reshape the load, because we pull power from wherever the signals tell us to. And so the whole notion of a base load central plant and then these other distributed resources, that's very 20th century. And while it will take us a while to get to a load shaping based energy system, we will get there. And it's going to work a lot better and afford more choice.
Back to my metaphor of silver buckshot, it's not obvious that we don't need these baseload generation alternatives. To me, we need some of everything. Right now, we don't know exactly what the mix is going to look like. And by the way, it's going to evolve over time. So I think precluding baseload generation is really, certainly in my world, is not something I'm willing to do. And there are renewable fuels that can be used for baseload generation, including solid biomass, biogas, biofuels, geothermal. So there's, and back to the nuclear, I still think that's on the table. So it's not clear that baseload is going to go away and that we're going to be able to send the right price signals to eliminate the need for that entirely.
Not now, but this is the early part of the 21st century, and we're not going to continue the 20th century model.
Dr. Sweeney, we'll give you the last word, then we'll move to another question.
Yes, my libertarian friend is apparently a closet Republican, because I agree with everything he said.
No.
I think we're going in that direction. I just want to point out that when we're talking about storage, we're not just talking about morning versus night. We're talking about winter versus summer. That of course of the year storage is really big issue, and how much you got to store for those. That type of variation is massively more than you have to do for winter versus day versus night, and car batteries are just not going to cut the mustard on doing it. We need a lot of technological advance, a lot of information technology to do it. The demand side management is important, but we're not there yet, and I've been really an advocate for what happens on the demand side. That will be an important part, but it's certainly not the final answer.
You know, people used to say electric cars wouldn't work either. So, you know, I think you need to look ahead and not dwell on a past that is no longer relevant or meaningful to our children and their children.
I'm
Actually,
looking
the New
forward
England
to, I'm
ISO
looking
the New
to
England
forward to a
ISO
richer, more diverse energy supply
Okay, the
rather
New
than
England-
2 or 3 alternatives.
They already did a study in the New England, I think it was the New England ISO, where they looked at how much can we do without referring to batteries at all. And it was 94%, I believe, is the
Yeah.
number of all of the days of the year there would be no need for any kind of fossil use. Just by bringing in different kinds of renewable energy from different places that they could reach with the grid.
Especially all that hydro from Canada.
Yeah, right, Kodak.
All right, so we have time for one more question. I'm very sorry. Please
Hi.
state your name, ask your question.
My name's Alex Canara. I just came late, so I didn't hear all the initial talk, but we had a very serious discussion, and compared to the kind of levity here, about the environment and power sources, because we have a serious problem well before 2030. My mother was usually the only Democrat on the town council back in New Jersey, and those are old towns. So I'm really surprised that I agree with the Republican more and the Libertarian more.
Is there a question?
Yeah, so the question is, 2 parts. How many of the speakers here have a degree in physics or engineering? Good, that's what I thought. So the question is, why misrepresent solar and wind? I'm a stockholder in solar and in Tesla. Hey, Jim, you should have bought at 35. The problem with wind and solar in California in particular is that it causes gas to be burned. And the Aliso Canyon gas
Have you
leak.
not been listening? It does not.
He doesn't listen.
No,
Yeah.
I happen to be an
So,
engineer. and
Okay.
so please just
So
ask a question.
The question is,
What's the
how can you
question?
have a position that displays the fact that you haven't studied the problem? Because we just added 600 megawatts of gas burning in the San Diego area simply to make up for a quarter of San Onofre.
Yeah.
That was the
We
CPUC
don't
on
need to
February
listen to
10th.
this. We all have records of accomplishment. We have track records. We're extremely
That's fine,
successful.
but you still
So-
have to
so,
obey
sir-
the
We
scientific.
understand it.
You
Sir-
have to
better
meet
than
the
you do.
scientific criteria.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Right.
much.
And I don't think you are.
You must be an MIT grad.
So,
This is another incorrect assumption by you. I'm a Stanford grad.
so I apologize,
I'm
but
embarrassed to say we have the same alum. We're alums of the same
So,
institution.
please stop. So, in the interest of time, because I've made a commitment that we're going to finish at 9:30, we're going to have to move off the question and answer, and I apologize. I would like to give, as promised, each of my panelists the opportunity to make a short closing remark, the message on which you would like to conclude this evening. Mr. Iyer, would you please go first?
Well, I've repeated myself several times, so I'm just going to say, not only do I believe in markets and market forces if we have efficient pricing that includes environmental externalities and harm, but I also, on the flip side, have very limited faith in government to do the right thing. Again, it's a human nature thing. It's politics, it's crony capitalism, it's biases, it's incomplete benefit cost assessments. And I think the market mechanisms are much better at sorting these things out than using emotionally based criteria and programs. So, I would encourage you not to have this high degree of faith in government. If nothing else, it's pretty clear to most people, at least recently, that government is way too large, way out of scope, and is pretty ineffective generally. So we want to keep that's one of the reasons libertarians like to keep the scope pretty limited, and energy policy is nothing different.
Well done. Nice and brief. Ms. Fun.
Well, I think you're stealing one of the Republican lines. Let's make America great again.
Didn't say that.
Well, America is pretty great, and we have a lot of global problems that America can take a leadership position in solving. And the fact that we have led in electric vehicles, the fact that we have high levels of renewables, that we're creating the iconic companies of the future because we're using the private sector and leveraging policy, that's the smart thing to do. That's how we create wealth. That's how we send our kids to great colleges. And that is really how we'll expand the benefits of clean energy to all that need them, and to all walks of life. I would just say that on the adaptation front, I didn't really get a chance to talk about the negative kind of hubristic, is that a word? The hubris of geoengineering that my Republican opponent described. I will just suggest that one of our investments, SpaceX, which is making recyclable rockets and exploring space and colonizing Mars, that is an adaptation strategy. If we really mess up here, we will be able to. That's a better way to adapt to climate change. And I'm going to then geoengineering, and I'm going to offer my friendly Professor Sweeney one of the first seats.
Thank you. But what would my wife think about me flying out there with you?
I didn't say I was going.
Oh.
Mr. Roast.
Hi. Okay. Thank you. Green New Deal, New Apollo program. So back in 2001, there was a New Apollo program design. The idea is that in the disadvantaged communities, we teach people how to do energy efficiency retrofits, how to do in manufacturing and installing renewable energy, new transit and all the rest of it. That's actually the core also of the Green New Deal program, the green transition. So that's a huge opportunity for us. The Berryman Group did an econometric input-output analysis of that and said when solar prices were 5 times what they are today, they said it would pay for itself in 10 years in terms of social benefits and tax benefits. So we have a great future in front of us. We should go for it. We are looking at, we should actually build on that So imagine lots of people converting old cars to battery electric in 3 to 5 years. So instead of wasting money and materials and all that on more cars, let's convert some of that we already got. It's just one example of many.
All right. The last word, Dr. Sweeney.
Yeah, I think we actually have a very bright energy future because a lot of good things are happening in technology, in process, and economic systems and behavioral changes that are important on both the demand side and the supply side of the energy market. On the demand side, we've really had tremendous progress since 1973, and as I said, the book that I hope all of you can get the electronic version for Amazon for $5.38, so it's really cheap, it's value pricing. But we have made a lot of progress, and things are starting to happen on the supply side in the new clean energy technologies. I think we have a bright energy future. One thing I do want to make America great again in a serious way. Energy policy did not used to be a partisan policy issue. If you look at energy efficiency policy, energy efficiency laws were signed into law by 4 Republican presidents and 2 Democratic presidents. Ford, Reagan, Bush, Obama, and Carter all passed energy efficiency laws. It used to be a time where energy was not a partisan issue. It's gotten terribly partisan, and really, I'd like to go back to the time when we recognized there's national interest in energy and stop the damn partisan bickering that we have going on, except for what we had at the stage, which is wonderful partisan bickering.
Well, Dr. Sweeney seemed to have certainly garnered most of the applause lines tonight. We are just about done, but before you stand, I think Doug Springs is going to speak a little bit. However, I'd like to thank all of you for your interest and attention tonight. Larry Kelly for envisioning and orchestrating tonight's panel. Please join me in thanking. Go right ahead. Thank you, Larry. And please join me in thanking the organizers, the Band of Angels, the MIT Club of Northern California, Park for hosting us for this event, and for the 4 knowledgeable experts and brave souls for giving us their time and thoughtful remarks this evening. Please thank our panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, this is my 7th year in leading the...
Doug, we may lose Nancy.
Well, Nancy, don't go, just stay for a second.
My Uber's not here yet.
Okay, good. Okay.
So this is our 7th season, and this is our kickoff event. And I have to say that of all of the last events that we've had, and we've had some really great ones, I think this is the best ever. So I want to really thank all of you participants for an extremely entertaining and thoughtful discussion. Jeff as our master moderator, and I appreciate, one of the things that I've always noticed is that when well-informed, thoughtful, reasonable people develop viewpoints, they tend to converge rather than diverge. And I think we saw a lot of that tonight. There's probably a lot more agreement here than there is disagreement, although there was some disagreement, which is evident. But and I really appreciate the fun, humor that has been tossed into all this. It's a serious subject, but on the other hand, it just makes the experience all that more memorable. So thank you very much. So Larry, if you come up and one by one, let's pass out our presenters' gifts. You can see it in the middle of the slide. It's a bottle, it's called Intrinsic Cabernet Sauvignon. And this is our tradition, is to give a bottle of nice California wine out to our participants. So go ahead, Larry, one at a time. Let's start with Jim over at the end, Dr. Sweeney. And applause for these guys as we give them a...
Thank you, Larry.
And for our next panelist, Mark Rust.
Roost.
Roost. And Ms. Fund. And Jim Iyer. And Jim, I have to confess that I'm a closet libertarian, and you just made me feel even more strongly about it. So
no glasses?
Thank you very much. And last but not least, of course, to a person who really did a lot of work in organizing this, Jeff Byron. Thank you so much for moderating. And now, if you all wait just for a couple of minutes, we're going to do coming attractions and then a few thank yous, and we'll be done. So first of all, this will be the 7th tour of the California Independent Service Operator in Folsom, California, coming up on Thursday, November 10th. I've done this, I did the first one actually. If you are really interested in how energy is distributed around the state, this is a must-do, and it's very, very informative. So I really hope that some of you who haven't done this tour yet, please take advantage of it. Secondly, and I'm really excited about announcing this, is that the director of a new documentary called Time to Choose, which is a movie about climate change and the mitigation of climate change. He will be here on November 16th, which is a Wednesday, here at Park, and to introduce the movie. We'll watch the movie, and then he will be there to lead the question and answer session afterwards, including why did you make it, what was it like, what about the people you met, what do you think of them, and so on and so forth. I think it's just going to be a terrific time. And for those of you who are from MIT and maybe remember the old lecture series committee movies that we would have once a week, how many people remember that? Oh, good. It's a lot more than I was afraid of. Okay, great. Well, anyway, this is sort of what the inspiration was for. So we've never done a movie before, but now we're going to do a movie, but it's a special one because we have the movie's director, and he's an Oscar winner, so he's a special guy. I want to thank Park, Scott Elrod, who's our professional host. Scott, are you here? Oh, you missed it, Scott. Goodness gracious. Too bad. Rob, are you here? McHenry? No. Anyway, Susie Mulhern and admin, David Padilla in catering. He did the food. And Joe Sullivan, who wasn't here tonight, but Drake Rice is up in the booth there, and he did all the work, including video record this. If you have friends who want to see what happened tonight, and I think there should be a lot of them, I think it's pretty good, we will be posting this video on our website in a couple of weeks, I think, if not sooner. It all depends on how quickly we can get that done. Park has really been a very important venue for us, and we always like to give them just a little bit of plug. There's 3 things that you might be interested in with them. One, if you're a large and medium-sized company and you want to look at some technological innovation, Park may be developing technology you could be interested in. It's also an incubator for startups, and they provide a lot of services for that, and that could be a really good way. I personally know a person who went through the whole incubation process here at Park and sold their company successfully, so it does work. And finally, you may want to work here, so that's the other possibility as well. And then finally, you know, we can't really do these things without all the volunteers from the Club of Northern California. But the one in particular I have to mention is Larry Kelly, because this was Larry's brainchild. We have a planning meeting usually in June or July every year and figure out what we're going to do for the coming season. And we didn't think of this at all. So this came out of his own idea about, well, you think maybe 60, I think it's 60, 75 days ago. It wasn't very long. I thought it was a great idea. And so he did all the work in thinking through how we do it, recruiting all the panelists, including our moderator. And I think that this was probably about, they did a lot of work, you could tell. They had copious notes and so on and so forth. But Larry, we couldn't have done it without you. You've been a great contributor over the years anyway, but this is your crowning achievement to date. So thank you very, very much. We should give him an applause. So as you came in, Greg Dieguez was overseeing the group of people who were staffing the tables. Steve, Liz, Craig, and Eileen, and Don and Bob were doing the passing around the roving microphones. So a total team effort, and we can't not mention Bill Murray, our Bill Murray, who takes photography, and he memorializes these events in wonderful ways, so we really appreciate that a lot. So that's it. I don't know, are you all willing to stay a little later and talk to people individually? Yeah?
Nancy's not.
Yeah, well, Nancy's gone, so yeah. She fled the room. Thank you all so much for coming.